So I think we're live and we will get started. Uh, Thank you all for taking part in this live stream for Reach the World. My name is Christopher Ahern. I am Director of Partnerships, and joining me today is Timothy Jacob, who is the Director of Reach the World's Traveler Program. This is actually a rebroadcast of a PD session that we held earlier this week. We had a few minor technical difficulties. So in the interest and in support of the educators, students, and families who will be using this, we wanted to make sure that we had a really quality version of this presentation for you all to use. So today we're going to be talking about scheduling and preparing for a video call. So before we begin, we are actually beginning every single one of these PD sessions with this slide because it is so important to reiterate and reiterate and reiterate over the coming weeks and months. You are all leaders in the world of virtual learning by being educators, students, families who are participating in at-home, online, distance learning, whatever you call it. You are leaders by just the nature of participating in this. I know not every day is easy, but for that matter, we are here to support you however we can. We are here for you. And that is not just lip service. That is something that is really core to myself and Tim and the rest of our team. We want to help you however we can. And so please visit athome.reachtheworld.org, athome.reachtheworld.org for the most up-to-date information. You can also take a look at what we are posting on social media. So you can find us on Facebook and on Twitter and Instagram. On Twitter and Instagram, we are at Reach the World Co. And we will be posting opportunities to work with us, new things that we are developing, new additions to our website, upcoming video calls, and a whole bunch more. Everything for free. We are only doing free programming for the next few months to best support you all as you are looking for new and better opportunities for learning for yourselves and for the young learners under your supervision. So a really brief overview of today's session. I'm going to do a little bit more of an introduction to myself and to my colleague, Tim. We'll talk really briefly about Reach the World. Then we're going to go into a little bit more about video calls. So how to schedule, how to prepare, some resources that we find to be pretty helpful. And then some, we want to share a slide so you know how you can ask us some questions, provide us some feedback on this. We always want this to be helpful. So if this isn't helpful, please let us know. We will take that feedback to heart. And some final conclusions and ways that you can begin using this in your distance learning environment right away. So my name is, like I said, I'm Chris Ahern. I am Director of Partnerships here at Reach the World. And on this call as well is Tim Jacob, the Director of our Traveler Program. And we both work for Reach the World. Reach the World is a virtual exchange organization that since 1998, so for over 2 decades, we have been one of the leaders in the world in virtual exchange that is providing opportunities for classrooms to explore the world through technology. And in our case, our particular flavor or brand of virtual exchange is actually connecting those classrooms through our network of volunteer travelers. They are study abroad students on Gilman scholarships. They are Fulbright grantees teaching English or doing research. Some of them are even explorers on expedition. And Tim and I work very closely together, we are both former educators ourselves. We both come from a classroom background, and now we work on connecting those those educators and classrooms, which is my primary responsibility, and those travelers that I just mentioned, that is Tim's responsibility. And we help make sure that they can connect and create immersive, engaging opportunities for young learners to then become curious, confident, and compassionate global citizens. So what we're going to talk about today is really about making the most of video calls. So the place that we need to start is just going into some basics about what video calls are. There are a whole host of video call platforms. There are obviously Zoom, Skype, and Hangouts, which are the main ones that most schools use, but there's also others, whether you're talking about Citrix or FaceTime or Blue Jeans or a whole other bunch of different types of apps out there. But most schools typically center around Zoom, Skype, and or Google Hangouts, and some use actually a combination of those. Now, while all three have great advantages and some drawbacks, none are perfect, we really want to stress that you should use what works best for your particular environment. Some of you are Microsoft classrooms, so Skype might be a better option. Some of you might be Google classrooms, so Hangouts might be a better option. And some of you, because especially in the midst of this, that Zoom has been really stepping up some really amazing offerings. Some of you also might be using Zoom, and this is actually taking place through Zoom. And to simplify this session, we will be focusing a little bit on some of Zoom's features, but the vast majority of the things that I will be sharing with you are meant to be applied across not only these three platforms, but just about any other video conferencing platform that exists out there. So there is an important distinction for us to begin this conversation and clarify that whether you're talking about video calls or the more generic term of video conferences, that's not quite the same thing as virtual exchanges. Now, video calls use technology to connect people or groups of people through an internet connection, whereas virtual exchanges are technology-enabled, sustained people-to-people education programs. And that definition actually comes to us from the Virtual Exchange Coalition, of which we at Reach the World are proud members. Now, video calls are an important, I would consider them an essential part of most, but not necessarily all virtual exchanges. I believe that that video calls make up a really important element of what I consider to be kind of top-notch or high-quality virtual exchanges. But I have seen many really wonderful virtual exchanges that either because of limitations due to technology or other reasons, video calls are actually not a part of. So that's just a very quick distinction, that virtual exchange, video conference, some people will interchange those two terms, but in this case, we're really just talking about video calls, which is one small part of a greater discussion on virtual exchange. And we actually have on our YouTube channel a whole PD session that we just recorded yesterday on using best practices in virtual exchange in your personal learning environment. So please go to our YouTube channel and check that out for some more information about the concept of virtual exchange. So getting into scheduling a video call. The first piece is to set that time and date. And one thing for you to consider is, will the session recur on a set interval? What that means is, do you expect to engage in a weekly video call with that particular group of, let's say, students at the same time on the same day, either daily or weekly or biweekly? But will it recur? And for that matter, do you need to consider time zones? Most of the time when we're talking about, let's say just broadcasting a video call from you to your students, you're probably in the same time zone. But if you wanted to bring in, let's say, a featured guest, you may have to think about what that time difference may be. For example, I'm speaking to you all from my home in New York City, but Tim is actually joining us from Chicago. So whenever we are setting up these calls, we have to consider that there is actually a 1 hour time difference in between us. Now, the next piece would be that you need to build your event in the app. And in the case of Zoom and Google Hangouts Meet, you can actually build out the event and then sync that to your calendar. And in doing so, you can then send invitations through that calendar invite that has the information to access the call embedded into the invite. The other opportunity that that gives you is that it also allows you to see who has opened and accepted that invitation and who hasn't. So for those of you, I'm thinking especially as a former teacher of middle school students, that's a way for me to track would be a way for me to track some of my students who maybe they need a little bit more time and urging to make sure that they have the information. Because the last thing that you want to do as you're setting up a video call is get a bunch of emails or texts or WhatsApp messages from your students saying, I don't know how to access this thing. So using an embedded or integrated calendar will help you manage some of those potential last minute issues. Now, after scheduling that call, the next thing is to really prepare. It is really important, and I cannot stress this enough, to test your setup. So that means not only the device that you will be using for that, whether it is a tablet or a phone or laptop or desktop, but test your setup as best as you can, and for that matter, make sure that you are maximizing your computer's processing power. So if you have multiple windows open, I've seen plenty of Zoom-based broadcasts where someone shares their screen and it looks like they have probably 75 tabs open. That's putting a lot of stress on your computer, and you are really asking for trouble somewhere in the middle of your broadcast. Similarly, if you are in an environment where multiple people are online at the same time, that could be a challenge too, especially if people are doing high bandwidth things like playing video games or are streaming their own video, or they're watching Netflix in the other room. So do what you can to do that within reason. It will make it, the more you can reduce what's called lag, or that kind of quick delay between what someone sees and how they react, the better you can create a more immersive and engaging experience for the people that are on the call with you. And then the other piece too is to make sure that your background supports rather than detracts from what you're doing. When we move from the screen share to the camera view, you'll see that most of what you can see from this particular position is a blank ceiling, and that's because I want you all to be focused on me rather than being distracted on what may be happening behind me. I've seen a lot of really amazing educators within the Reach the World community who are actually using that background to look like their classroom. So they have a lot of the different elements that students would recognize from being there. I think that is actually a really great example of contributing rather than detracting to the student, especially the student learning experience. And remember what I said for the scheduling. You can also use that calendar invite once you've made it to send your students links to relevant resources. That's actually something that we like to do at Reach the World, is that we will send updated calendar invites with specific information, whether it's something that we want to talk about or a link to something that we need to be discussing on that particular call. It's a really great way to consolidate. And especially for those of you who are using the Google Docs suite, you can also link directly to a particular document that maybe you want your students to look at or even edit while you're on that call. So the other piece that I think is really important, especially when you're working with younger learners, is to create collective norms with your students so you can make the most of these conversations. And so this is really kind of a before action, right? So before you get on the call, or maybe this is the first thing you do, as a part of these video calls, is to kind of come to a set of agreements and say, how do we want to behave as a group, as a classroom, so that way we can be respectful of one another. And so the more you can get your students or your young learners to say, okay, well, maybe we should agree that we should all self-mute when we're not speaking, that we keep our cameras on and we keep focused on the camera. Kids, from my experience, they will come to those if you help them lead the discussion. And so the more that you can come to those agreements before you get on the call, the more that you and the people that are on the call with you can all hold yourselves and one another accountable to those norms. Honestly, this is an extension of something I did as an educator. One of my favorite lessons that I was a part of when I was a middle school social studies teacher is that with a group of my students, we came up with a set of norms for our middle school, and so we worked together to figure out what words defined us as a group, as a school community. And you are still a community even if you are all tuning in from different parts of your city or even from different parts of the country. So just think about how you can use those norms to build that community that will keep everyone feeling safe, engaged, and comfortable in what can be a unique, if not stressful, environment. Now, there are a lot of settings in a lot of this video conferencing software, especially in Zoom. So I would strongly recommend that you take a look at this as you're preparing and setting up the call. So do you want to set it up so that when people enter this meeting, that you mute upon entry? Do you want to set an additional host who can help you with the responsibilities of moderation and student engagement? Things on Zoom, they have opportunities to set breakout rooms. There's a lot of power in these, and so the more you can understand how you can use them, obviously testing them ahead of time, but the more you can use them, the more enriching the entire experience can be. And also just think about opportunities for interactivity. So, so are there ways that your students can just, while staying quiet, be on camera, right? One thing again that I like to use in my classroom was the thumbs up, thumbs down rule. So, okay, who gets this? Thumbs up, thumbs down, or sideways? And so that's something that everyone can remain quiet in, but you can very quickly read the room and see, okay, we can see now where we need to provide some additional support. The chat also is a great way to measure engagement. And actually the part 2 of this professional development session goes into a little bit more about moderating, which gets into some of those other opportunities for interactivity. Now, there are a lot of really wonderful resources out there in the internet, and we have found a few to be really special that we wanted to share with you. So for those of you who are using or are thinking about using Zoom, these 2 links that we have right here are really wonderful. These are actually have been made in-house at Zoom. It's not an external or third party. We looked at them ourselves and they're really strong. Similarly, Skype has a whole section of their website, or I should say Microsoft has a whole section of their website around Skype education. And then for those of you who are using Google, Google has done a really wonderful job of not only talking about how Hangouts and video conferencing software can use, but how it can integrate within their entire Google Classroom suite. That particular one was updated very recently, right when the pandemic first started causing school building closures, and the resources that they include are quite wonderful. We at Reach the World have begun developing our own resources. So there are 2 that we really wanted to kind of feature within this conversation. The first of which is it's a KWL chart. So for all of you teachers who are watching this, a KWL chart is a pretty standard piece of equipment for us. But when you're working with especially young learners and there is a video based presentation, having a KWL chart that students can use is a great way to make sure that they are learning actively within that experience. And then also the other piece is that Reach the World, we are actually curating and updating a really large collection of at-home learning resources. So having been working with New York City public schools for over 20 years, we have developed a lot of really great lesson plans and activity sheets and other resources that we believe can be of benefit to you. And we have taken the best and are continuing to update that folder with more and more resources that are available in both Google Doc and in PDF format. So if you need something that's printable, or if you need something that is directly accessible and editable, you have the ability to use that. And all of these links are available to you right from this deck. So we are making all of our slide decks available for you to view and to use however you see fit. This presentation is accessible at tinyurl.com/RTWPD-1. That's tinyurl.com/RTWPD-1. And the way that we are trying to make this as easy as possible for you is that as we continue to do new presentations in this PD series, the numbers will just continue to increase. So as of today, we actually have 1, 2, and 3 fully available for you to use. Also, please visit athome.reachtheworld.org. That is athome.reachtheworld.org for the most up-to-date information. And then most importantly, please email us. If there's anything you need, any question you have, any feedback that you can provide, please email myself and Tim, and our emails are quite easy to remember. I'm Chris@reachtheworld.org, and Tim is Tim@reachtheworld.org. We are so happy and so thankful that you are using these resources and that you are willing to work with us in such a trying time. And however we can continue to help and support the work that you are doing, we will be doing that today, tomorrow, and for the next few months, if not longer. And we are just happy to help however we can. So I'm going to stop my screen share right now, and just if there's any other final comments that you want to make, Tim. Otherwise, we will end it here.
Sure. Just real quickly, when it comes to scheduling and using video call software, I think speaking for myself, using Zoom is something that was new to me within the last 2 years, and is something that I've gained a lot of proficiency with just through repetition and through playing around with some of the really incredible settings. Some of the nuances that I didn't appreciate before, including like giving students the ability or maintaining sort of the ability to be the sole person in charge of who's muted and who's not muted, are some really powerful tools in terms of education that don't translate to in-person teaching, but are really great for digital teaching and at-home learning. And through just sort of continued exploration and reaching out, if you have any questions, we'd love to help you feel more comfortable with this incredible software.
Yeah, and just to finish on one last thing, that as a former educator and also as someone who's not a parent, I very much, whenever I am presenting and working with folks through Reach the World, I am always thinking through that lens of an educator. But these resources that we're creating, we're really trying to make sure that they are similarly available to those of you who are working with young learners in your home that are not necessarily your students. So whether you are a parent or grandparent or some other type of caregiver looking for something to do, we hope that these resources can be just as helpful for you. And if you need something in particular, again, please email us and reach out, because we know that you are in the same situation, and we want to make sure that these resources can be of support to you. And in the next few days, we'll be launching a new version of the athome.reachtheworld.org website, which will include a very special section just for families. So that is also something for you to look forward to. But again, if you do need resources, this is not by any means restricted to educators, because having kids at home, and Tim, I know you're a dad, so you understand this better than most. You're an educator too, whether you have a master's in ed or not.
Yep, that's absolutely right.
Well, I think that's where we can end it. So, so thank you so much for listening, and we will. I'm sure we will be. You'll see more from us very soon.